Safe and well. About a month ago, before the shul closed, when the coronavirus started to spread, in my sermon, I asked the question. I said, what's if the cure or the vaccine for the coronavirus comes out of Israel? Will the BDS movement continue their boycott, divestment, and sanctions of Israel and not take the cure or use the vaccine? And I didn't expect to get an answer so quickly and so clearly as I did yesterday from the very founder of the BDS movement, Omar Barghouti, who answered the question in a live webinar yesterday. I'll get back to what he said in a moment. However, I want to tell you about one of my favorite songs. It's a song that was produced on a record called Journeys. Yes, I say a record because in those days there were records. It was composed by A.B. Rottenberg. You can find it on YouTube today. It's called The Place Where I Belong. It's a very moving and stirring song. It's a song about a Torah. And it's the voice of the Torah speaking in the song. And the voice of the Torah says, I was made way back in 1842 in the city of Kiev. And he describes the joy of being a Torah, read and put on full display 3 times a week, Monday, Thursday, and Shabbat when the Torah is read, being kissed and embraced and hugged by all the members of the synagogue, being read out loud by the rabbi, being danced with on Simchas Torah, being admired and revered by all. However, he then describes, the Torah describes that the Nazis came and destroyed the synagogue, and Moshe the Shamash was brave and he hid me in a cellar. And after the war, he was discovered, this Torah. And he says he was put into a crate and shipped to America, where he was purchased by some antique dealers and placed behind the glass in a museum. And the Torah cries out from behind the glass, and he says, I want to be in the place that I belong, which is a synagogue. I don't want to be in a museum. The Torah describes in pain how people come into the museum and admire its beauty as a work of art. And the Torah says, across the room in the museum, I could see some of my friends back from Kiev, a pair of candlesticks, a menorah. We were all part of Jewish life, and now we're just sitting in glass cases. And so this beautiful song was always a very moving and inspiring song about the connection between the Jewish people and the Torah, the love and the bond, and how the Torah is not in home, it's out of its real rightful place when it's not being utilized and celebrated with in a synagogue. Well, A.B. Rottenberg came back last week during this coronavirus and updated the song. And he wrote a follow-up to the song. And this time it's the Torah in the ark. And the Torah is in the ark, and the Torah now is crying out again. But this time the Torah is saying, I am in the ark, but we are the Jewish people in the synagogue. I miss the sounds of prayer, the songs, the melodies, the Lecha Dodi on Friday night. I miss the sounds of Torah learning. I miss the feeling of being embraced by the members of the synagogue, by the rabbi, being kissed, being held up high when I am raised up in the synagogue. And the Torah is crying once again and saying, when will the Jewish people come back to the synagogues? Because I yearn and long for their presence, to be reunited with them once again. King Solomon in the book of Kohelet, Ecclesiastics, has a famous dialectic where he discusses in chapter 3 of Kohelet, he says, I-llness, there's a time to be born, W-e-llness, there's a time to die. I-livkot, W-e-llness, there's a time to cry and there's a time to rejoice, to laugh. And then one of the dialectics that he mentions is Eis lachbok ve'eit lirchok mechabek. There's a time to hug and to embrace, and there's a time to distance ourselves from an embrace. And perhaps King Solomon had in mind the times we're living in now. Normally we love to embrace one another, to be close to each other, to hug each other. Eis lechabek, there's a time to hug. But unfortunately in life there's a time lirchok mechabek, to distance ourselves from a hug, from a physical embrace. However, we know that King Solomon was not only talking about the physical relationship between man and man, but the book of Kohelet is also a metaphor for our relationship with God. And yes, King Solomon is actually saying that there is a time to embrace God, and there's a time to distance ourselves from embracing God. And perhaps that's what we're experiencing now as well. there's a very unusual Passover upon us, a Passover in which Jews throughout the world will not go to synagogue, will stay home. And we ask ourselves, how can it be that we are distancing ourselves from God? How could it be that we're not able to go into the synagogue? How could it be that on this most joyous holiday, the birth of our nation, the holiday of Pesach, Jews and God will not be together in the synagogues praying and learning together as we celebrate the 3,332nd anniversary of our liberation and exodus from Egypt, which led us to become the nation we are today? How could it be that we're distanced from God? And the Ber Mayim Chaim, a great Hasidic Rebbe, answers it, and he says that yes, indeed, there are times in life that in order to come closer with a greater connection, we first have to experience a distancing. Just like with the light of the sun, sometimes it's so bright that we need to have a screen in order to filter the light, to diminish the light, so we could see more clearly. The Ber Mayim Chaim says that sometimes spiritually we have to feel our distancing from Hashem in the physical sense in order to have a greater and a deeper appreciation, that we come back with greater joy and greater love and greater reverence. And I hope that this period of time that we're home from Passover synagogue and throughout this whole period of the coronavirus, we'll come to a deeper appreciation of what it means to go to shul. Then when we come to shul, it's a privilege, it's an honor, it's a merit. And we should use our time to pray with feeling, with concentration, with devotion. We should not talk during the services. We should focus on the words of the prayer and the words of the Torah study. We should realize that it's a gift. And maybe this temporary distancing, just like the water, dam water, that when it's held back and then it's released, it gushes with greater gusto and flow. Hopefully we'll have a greater love and appreciation for each other, for Hashem, for the Torah, for the mitzvahs, for synagogue life, when we're able to return, please God, very soon. Yes, eis lechabek, there's a time to embrace, but there's a time, lerchok mechabek, to distance from the embrace. Rabbi Shlomo Kalbach once said that the reason we break the matzah at the beginning of the Seder, yachatz, we crack the matzah in half and put away a half of the matzah for the very end of the Seder for the Afikomen, is because one of the great truths of life is that in order to feel whole and complete, we first have to experience what it means to be broken. Only after the Jews were broken in spirit and in body through the slavery in Egypt were they able to appreciate fully the wholeness and the completion and the joy of being liberated and receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai and becoming God's nation. Sometimes through the brokenness, like the broken matzah, we come to the end of the Seder, where we understand the Seder, the order of life, the full meaning and purpose, and we're able to complete our broken matzah by taking out the hidden piece of broken matzah and bringing together the brokenness and creating wholeness and oneness. And then we have the deeper appreciation and joy of being whole again. Every human being experiences brokenness on one level or another, but please God, it's only to feel more complete and more whole afterwards. And so too our prayer, our deep prayer right now is, there is so much brokenness on this Passover. People are sitting alone without family and friends, elderly people isolated. Even worse than that, there are people who their relatives are in the hospital as they observe Passover. Even worse than that, there are people who lost loved ones and are sitting down to a Seder without their loved ones. There are no words to comfort them. There are no words to understand, to express that pain. And for some, tragically, life will never be the same again. And our hearts go out to them in prayer and healing and love and comfort. And we say to them, we are with you. God bless you. God heal you. God make you during this very difficult, painful time. But each and every one of us must find an area in our life that we're not complete, that we feel brokenness, and realize that it is only to be used as a stepping stone to raise us up higher, to make us more complete, more improved, to make us better human beings and better Jews, better fathers, better mothers, better husbands, better wives, better children, better brothers and sisters, better friends, more loving and compassionate human beings. We should become more whole as individuals, as families, as communities, as a nation, as a country, as a world. And if that is the case, then this brokenness will serve some ultimate purpose. There is a both tragic and humorous anecdote about a man on the Titanic who asked the waiter for a glass of ice. when tragically the Titanic went and hit the iceberg, and he turned to his friend and he said, "I asked for ice, but not that much ice." You know, the haters sometimes want to hate, but they want to hate in measure. They say, "We want to hate, but not that much hate." Well, yesterday, Omer Bagadi, the head of the BDS movement, was asked a question on one of his webinars. What will happen if Israel, which may very realistically be the case very soon, comes up with a cure or with a vaccine for the coronavirus? What shall we BDS followers of your movement do if that comes to be? And Omer Bagadi, and this has been widely reported in all the news outlets, responded and said, no. If Israel comes up with a cure or with a vaccine for the coronavirus, you will be permitted to take it. Because if it's something that is life-saving, and especially if it could save the lives of millions of people, then the BDS restrictions would not be in place. You would be released from this BDS, and you would be allowed to go and utilize this vaccine and this cure. And so I say to Omer Bagadi and all the anti-Semites or anti-Zionists, anti-Israel, which is really one and the same, remember that you can't always contain your hatred. Sometimes, like a virus, you may start with small, measured hatred, but it only grows and grows. Just like love goes viral, hatred goes viral. And the damage you have done with your BDS movement is not only damage to Israel, but you've done more damage to yourselves and to the world. Let us hope you will learn from this brokenness as well, that when this is over, someone's eyes will be opened, or at least some people's eyes will be opened, to realize that when we hate another, we ultimately turn and hate ourselves, because ultimately we are all one world, one universe, and what starts on one end of the world spreads to the other end of the world, as we've seen now. If you spread love, the love will come back to you. If you spread hatred, the hatred will come back to you, and you will suffer the consequences as well. Someone shared with me something very beautiful, and with this I would like to conclude. I mentioned in one of my earlier videos that we have to go from I to we. That in the beginning of this process, everyone was thinking about I, hoarding toilet paper and other material, shopping and supplies, because they were just worried about self-preservation. But as time goes on, we see people are less concerned with I and more concerned with we, more concerned with what they can do for others. Just yesterday, again, an anonymous member of our synagogue offered to provide Passover seders, complete Passover seders with a seder plate for anyone in need. And again, over 100 seders were delivered to members of the community who are shut in, elderly, and others who cannot afford due to the financial crisis going on now as well. And the letters of love and appreciation that came pouring into the synagogue were just overwhelming. How touching it was and how moving it was for people to realize how everyone's reaching out. And this anonymous sponsor said to me, if I could just alleviate a little bit of pain and bring a little bit of a joy during this dark time, it's all worth it. That's what we're seeing now. And someone pointed out to me something very beautiful, Harris Fried, and I want to thank him for it. He said that if you take the word illness, it starts with the letter I. What happens when you substitute the I of illness with the word we? Because we want to go from being self-centered to be other-centered, to be going from being selfish to being selfless. So if we substitute the I of illness with the word we go from illness to wellness. And that is not just a physical message, it's a spiritual message. When we think not only about I, but we think about we think in terms of us. And us means the global world community, all the way from all four corners of the earth, over 200 countries that have been affected by this virus. When we go into the we modality of thinking, and we include others in our thoughts, in our prayers, in our best wishes, in our actions, and in our deeds, that is the way we transform illness into wellness. May this happen very soon as we learn the lesson of we, and God willing, experience wellness very soon. And God willing, all those who are ill should go from illness to wellness. And may we celebrate it, although a quarantined and isolated Passover, a meaningful, most uplifting, spiritual, and vibrant Passover, as we take all these lessons to heart, and we ask many, many questions at the Passover Seder, and we delve deeper than we've ever delved into the meaning of life, the meaning of freedom, and realizing that sometimes true freedom can only be obtained after we've gone through the brokenness. Have a wonderful day.